After nearly 5 years of occupation by the Third Reich during the Second World War, Lego City was finally liberated by the British in May of 1945. The war had left the city in ruins, not just from the carnage and destruction typical of warfare in that era, but from the mass looting by high-ranking German officers of rare and priceless Lego sets, many of which would never be recovered. When the Allies had met at the Yalta Conference 3 months prior to the Lego City Liberation Campaign, it had been decided that Lego City would be placed firmly in control of the British and the Americans. US President FDR and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill were both avid collectors of Bionicles, and watching their production and lore fall into the hands of Joseph Stalin was a hard line for them in their post-war negotiations. But as fate would have it, FDR would be dead just 2 months later, and Churchill would be ousted as Prime Minister in the UK election of 1945, shortly after Lego City was liberated. With new blood leading the Western Allies, Stalin decided to push his luck at the Potsdam Peace Conference in July. He spent much of his time badgering President Truman and Prime Minister Attlee that he would not attack the Japanese in Manchuria unless he secured at least half of Lego City. President Truman, being a known Playmobil guy, relented, and in August of 1945, Lego City was formally divided into Western and Soviet occupation zones. Stalin's main drive in securing a chunk of Lego City was to profit from the immensely popular Lego industry, hoping to use the rapid cash flow from Lego purchases as a form of reparations. The Eastern Front had seen particularly brutal fighting, and the Soviet Union had suffered greatly during the war. Stalin hoped that the money from his Lego City occupation and his royalties from rewriting the Bionicles lore into a complex multimedia battle to kill a god usurper and restore the balance between the 3 Bionicle ecosystems would brick up the Soviet economy. While Berlin would be divided between democracy and communism within a communist-controlled territory, Lego City would be divided between Lego democracy and Lego communism within a democratic-controlled territory. Surrounded by the influence of capitalism on all sides, Stalin had his master builders construct a wall that enclosed Eastern Lego City into its own isolated domain that is commonly referred to as the Eastern Brick by Lego historians. Life in the Eastern Brick was prosperous during the first 10 years of the Soviet occupation. Stalin's infamous Things That Didn't Happen Lego collections were a smash hit across the globe and brought untold wealth to East Lego City. His communist master builders had caught the Americans off guard when in 1952 they created the first Lego nuclear weapon when they successfully split a double 2x4 flat piece that was stuck together. But this period of prosperity did not last. With Stalin's death in 1953, the Bionicles lore lacked a creative vision. The lore became too convoluted and difficult to understand, and the franchise began to fade into obscurity. Worse still, as television media began to reach more and more households across the world, many began to suspect that Stalin's Things That Didn't Happen Lego builds were not entirely truthful. This downturn in sales severely impacted the Eastern Brick's economy. Master builders began working longer and longer hours for less and less studs. Conditions became so harsh in the Eastern Brick that in the 1970s and 80s, many men started purposefully falling into the river in Lego City so they could float to the freedom that awaited them in the West. At first, the often criticized Eastern Lego City Police Department tried to stop men from falling into the river by building nets over the Lego City River and disassembling anyone who tried to get too close. But it was of little use. To make matters worse for the Eastern Brick, the Western Lego City government capitalized on the men falling into the river phenomenon to launch a tasteful propaganda campaign in the form of the LEGO City Rescue Collection, which was and still is tremendously popular. Ultimately, when the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 90s, so too would the Eastern Brick, and in a show of unity, master builders from East and West LEGO City would disassemble the LEGO brick wall that had once divided their beloved city. A shout out to my patrons for your continued support of this channel.